Welcome to Hot Topics on the Edge of Show. I'm Richard Carthon. I'm here with my co-host January Jones, and today we are stoked to have Brian McGleenon, who's from BeInCrypto. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Lovely to speak to you both.
Well, coming up today, the SEC says DeFi is part of the American spirit. MicroStrategy's Playbook is proliferating strategy within the industry. And we'll talk about the institutionalization of Bitcoin and chat with Brian about what's going on with being in crypto.
This is another production of the Edge of Company, a rapidly growing media ecosystem empowering the pioneers of Web3 technology, culture, and innovation. Let's get started.
All right, launching into it, the SEC's crypto task force hosted a fifth roundtable this week, and it was called DeFi and the American Spirit. The title alone signifies a complete 180 from where we were a year ago with the SEC. In fact, Commissioner Mark Ueda said the agency made a mistake in linking treasury markets with, quote, a heavy handed attempt to tamp down the crypto market, end quote. He is asking the agency to consider abandoning part of a proposed rule that would require DeFi projects to make regular filings with the SEC and be subject to mandatory disclosures. So, Brian, what do you think? Does crypto accept the apology here? That was quite the omission from him.
Yeah, well, things have definitely changed since Gensler headed the SEC, but I think also it's just a marked change across the world. You've got MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets framework, firmly enacted and working in the EU. And then also you've got the UK looking at what's happening in the EU, but also looking at what's happening across the pond in the US, what's happening under Paula Atkins as the new chair of the SEC. So I think it's always difficult for regulatory frameworks to try and include DeFi. And just chatting to different people that work in regulatory bodies, especially in the EU and the UK, they they could understand how to bring in what's happening, say, well, with centralized exchange, centralized order books, and things like that. But whenever you said to them, well, how are you going to regulate DeFi? How are you going to regulate anonymous wallets and things like that, especially decentralized exchanges, basically decentralized derivatives trading? At that stage, when I was chatting to them, they were sort of saying, look, it's one step at a time, because that is a to have oversight over DeFi across the globe is actually a really difficult thing to do. And but the thing is, we're moving in that direction. Obviously, Trump and World Liberty Financial, and then you've got Cantor Fitzgerald working with um, Tether to bring it in USDT out of the cold, out of the wilderness, into the to meet traditional finance payment rails and stuff like that. So DeFi does actually need to be tackled now. And I think that's what Commissioner Ueda was hinting at there. We can't put this off any longer. We are going to have to actually work out a way to gain oversight over DeFi.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of really good points, and to kind of add on to it, one of the reasons why they can't really ignore it is this emphasis to stable coins. I think there is a lot of interest in what stable coins are able to provide, and you also think about as the US is taking on more of the ability to have Bitcoin as a reserve, if you also want to still keep the dollar strong and if things move in digital, you want the digital asset that's being used to be backed by USD. And so when you look at what just happened with Coinbase and Circle, just basically doing what they just did with their IPO, and it went very well with their USDC coin that's out there. There are several other players that are now looking at what just happened and are also trying to do something similar within the stablecoin market. But then on top of that, when you think about, okay, well, with these stable coins, when you go to a lot of the DeFi practices, a lot of them go to either Bitcoin or USDC. And so if you're going to be interacting with all this, there needs to be some regulation and things put in place as we start to shift in that direction. So I am very optimistic that the SEC is looking at this and they're trying to, they call it the innovation exemption, because usually innovation is stifled by regulation, but they're really trying to allow for innovation to happen, and it's going to help provide uh, so much needed clarity and flexibility for developers and entrepreneurs who are building the DeFi space and just understanding how it's going to be regulated here in the U.S. So overall, I think this is very good news for the overall crypto landscape, especially for people who are involved in DeFi. And I think it's going to continue to progress in a more positive way.
You mentioned their stablecoins, and of course, when it comes to the innovations, the actual concrete use cases that have emerged from the crypto sector, stablecoins really, ironically, is the premier one, potentially the one that you could really say, this is definitely one that everyone is using at this moment in time, and usage of stablecoins is just going to increase over time. And you hinted there that that's going to increase dollar dominance around the world, and I suppose the US wants to get on top of that, wants to get some reins onto that. But when it comes to regulating DeFi, because USDT and stablecoins are going to be used a lot in DeFi, it's multi-jurisdictional. Well, it's not actually anchored in any jurisdiction. So there's a lot of complexities about how to go about oversight in this new innovation.
Yes, Brian, I was going to follow up on that vein, because having your global perspective from being in crypto is really helpful, because right now we're just hearing mostly what the US is doing. So, relatedly, like, where do you think the sentiment is? Is everyone in Europe looking over here and thinking we're going to get it right, and that it's going to be a more liberal and a better place for innovation? Or are people saying, I like the known here in Europe with Micah and such?
That's interesting. So Europe showed bravery in being the first to come up with a concrete framework for regulating the crypto space, crypto asset providers and exchanges, centralized exchanges and things like that. But what happens then is that the others that held back get to see what works in Europe and what doesn't work, and then they get to tweak their systems to attract investment, or to attract business to their jurisdictions. So it's a kind of like, we'll see what happens with Mika. We will adjust accordingly for regulatory frameworks in the US. But here's another thing: the UK are holding back for third mover advantage, because they're not going to act until 2026, 2027. They're going to watch how it plays out in the US as well, which is kind of a crafty maneuver.
Yeah, they're trying to redeem themselves from Brexit, right?
Well, yes, and the loss of A16Z or S16Z, as you say in the US. There were a lot of companies left the UK after Brexit, and yes, the UK did hail itself as as this promise to make this pledge that Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister of the UK, made a pledge to make the UK a global crypto hub. Now, that actually hasn't happened yet, but that ambition is still present, and the new Labour government are trying to lay the groundwork to attract inward investment, to attract Web3 companies, to attract all of these new providers of digital assets, custodial assets, in the heart of London, in the city of London, where I suppose it has the tradition of banking and the tradition of payments and the settlements industry.
Certainly, the World Global Finance Center, historically. So that's great perspective, and I love that we're getting that here on the show, because, yeah, like I said, lately it's been so concentrated on what's going on in the states. It's good to get a wider view, also to shape the perception, of how we also frame what's going on in crypto. So let's move on to the next story, which is from BeInCrypto. Recent story this week about MicroStrategy's Playbook, that more than 60 companies worldwide are now following their lead by adding Bitcoin to their corporate treasuries. Brian, can you give us a little summary of the gist of that story and what you see the implications are?
Oh, well, the implications are that MicroStrategy's strategy is working. The more the price of Bitcoin increases, I don't know what their break-even price is now. I haven't checked, but Sailor keeps on bravely accumulating every Monday or every Sunday night or something like that. Well, as Bitcoin has been reaching more and more all-time highs, and as the DXY, the dollar index, keeps on declining, if you look at those two charts, lay them against each other, I suppose it becomes a rational maneuver for lots of corporate treasuries around the world. And it ties in with what BlackRock CEO Larry Fink himself said about their advice to corporations or to investment funds around the world to at least have 5% allocation into Bitcoin. And that was a big statement made by Larry Fink, head of BlackRock. So corporations are watching this. They're watching inflation levels. They're watching the big, beautiful bill from the Trump administration, which is obviously going to create more of a debt crisis in the US. And I think having Bitcoin as part of your corporate treasury is a very rational maneuver.
Yeah, I think people can ignore what Michael Saylor has been able to pull off. Obviously, he's been one of the biggest, most zealous advocates for Bitcoin out there. But so far, history has proven him right, and so his microphone gets a little bit bigger and louder every single year. And then you have with ETFs coming into the fold a year ago, the amount of money that's been flowing into that, you can't really ignore. An asset that's gone astronomical pretty much every 4 years. Now, the other part of this, though, that I think is starting to shift is that traditional finance companies have ways to get Bitcoin on their books, whether it's through an ETF, whether it's going and buying it and just holding it themselves, whether there's a play now where in the U.S. People can potentially buy Bitcoin straight from their banks. So there's more and more accessibility, legal accessibility, which is then going to continue to flow over into this. And I think Brian brought up a lot of really good points around like price of that going up versus the price of or how the dollar standard's been holding up. But I think there's another interesting piece. Coinbase has a really interesting ad on going in the U.S. right now that talks about had you purchased a house with your dollars versus the amount of Bitcoin it would have taken you over the last several years, and how basically it's costing you more dollars over time, but it's costing you less Bitcoin over time.
Mm.
And there's actually been some different tools that have come out that now are literally putting anything that you can buy versus like how many Bitcoin would it like cost you, and then being able to show it that over time. And so I think more and more, not even just like your TradFi people, but your retail are like really starting to see this, and how that equation is starting to hit the market. So that the mind shift is definitely continuing to change. And then even just like it's interesting you bring up BlackRock with people putting 5%. I just started a really interesting conversation where Kathy was from ARC was basically saying how they do a ton of analysis, and none of this is financial advice, just going based on what she said in that interview, that their targets for where they think Bitcoin is headed in the next 5 to 10 years is well over $1 million. And when you have some of the largest hedge funds in the world starting to like make those kind of projections and things on your books, and then BlackRock saying you should get 5% divulged into that, like it just shows how seriously the world is seeing Bitcoin as an asset class that has a lot of upward opportunity. So, yeah, I've said this I think on quote like a few years ago, but in the same way that people see, um, what's he's been able to pull off. He might go down as one of the greatest traders of all time if Bitcoin actually does go over $1 million. He might be seen as the new Warren Buffett of our generation.
Yeah. Well, there's two issues that I suppose everyone, I'm sure the audience have asked themselves this. So if there is if people follow strategy to accumulate Bitcoin, the big question mark is, when do they start to sell? When do you start actually having to sell? Can all 61 of these companies, hold their Bitcoin forever? When do people start selling? What happens with forced liquidations? Would this start like a domino effect? So that's number one. And also, what would Satoshi think about all of the centralization of Bitcoin into the hands of major corporations around the planet, major banking institutions, major fund managers? Is that what he wanted? So there are the two big questions about this. Yeah, so I don't know whether you guys have thought about that, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we talk about that a lot on the show, but he was Dr. Frankenstein. He can't control his monster, what sits out in the world. He, she, they, whoever
Yeah,
Satoshi
that's true.
might be. But relatedly, there was a new report this week by Gemini and Glassnode that is saying over 30% of Bitcoin's circulating supply, as of recently, about 6.1 million BTC, worth roughly $668 billion, is now held by centralized entities such as exchanges, ETFs, public and private companies, DeFi protocols, and governments. So while centralized exchanges remain the largest custodians, the top three entities in each of these categories often control between 65 and 90% of those holdings. So this report is raising these questions about this, what we're talking about: concentration, market dynamics, and the evolving role of institutions in crypto. So going back to this issue, once again, when you really see those numbers, I mean, what does this mean for crypto for the rest of us, or for Bitcoin for the rest of us? And this is a signal to consumers who may think they can't get into this. So now it's altcoin season. Richard, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, several. I mean, there is and Brian was beginning to allude to it, like, which is the original vision of like what was the real purpose of Bitcoin for the decentralization, power to the people, etc., and the original vision of Satoshi versus what is it adopted to and where is it headed. And ultimately, Bitcoin is still have to this day has been one of the greatest financial wealth management opportunities for people who got in early. And as crazy as it sounds, with Bitcoin being over 100K, I personally still believe Bitcoin is early. If you have a lot of people who have the vision of, Bitcoin's potentially is going to over $1 million, that's still a 10x from where we are today. And then even looking at like these centralized exchanges, right? Like 10 years ago, 2015, there was roughly 600,000 Bitcoin that was owned by these central entities, and now it's over 6 million. That's a 10x, and I think it's going to continue to astronomically increase as price potentially goes up, and as you have governments that are now potentially putting Bitcoin on their books and in the reserves, etc. Also, El Salvador changing their basically monetary system to Bitcoin might go down as one of the greatest decisions a country has made as it relates to their economy. So like we'll see how that eventually pans out, but like there's already been a lot of positive things that have come from it. So just getting back to the original thing around like, is it bad? I don't know that it is. When you think about like what is actual adoption, and we talk about like everyday use, when you have more of these entities that are owning it, then that means the rest of the world is going to potentially be using it and continue to have an opportunity to get into it. So a lot of people think I missed the boat. It's too late, all this stuff. And I still say that like we're still super early on this market and there's still plenty of opportunity in front of us. But Brian, what's your take on it?
I don't really usually have any price targets because I just wouldn't know. But people that have been talking to me, like Jeff Kendrick from Standard Chartered, or the Bitcoin high priest himself, Max Kaiser, are giving sort of like end of Q3 price targets of about 250,000. By early 2026, 500,000. And then you've got, like, I think it was Kathy Wood, or was it Michael Saylor, said recently, was it 4 million? I think Max said about 2.4 million. I'm just plucking numbers out of my head now because when it goes
So
to
are
those,
they.
when it goes to those dizzy heights, like, whoa, it's just like, what does it matter then? And did Saylor recently say 12 million? for Bitcoin. I don't know if I'm just plucking
Not
numbers out of
sure.
my head now. Sorry, folks. But yeah, yeah, okay. So Max Kaiser has been correct all along, actually. So my father actually was following Max way back in around 2012, 2013, when he was on Russia Today, when he had the Kaiser report. And if you look back, he was basically telling people they need to buy Bitcoin back then. You know, Bitcoin was about under $1, and I think in 2014, Bitcoin was about, I don't know, the listeners can fault me on this, I think around $34 to $40, and then it just started to really skyrocket up, and it's now basically, if you pull out the chart, it's gone parabolic. So if those past patterns are anything to go by, but they're you can't say that any sort of black swan event or surprise punch comes out of the blue with Bitcoin. But if we go on past patterns, then yeah, we're probably still early. But who knows? Yeah. So, but there are a lot of different things, just sort of to cut back about centralization and things like that. If you look at Bitcoin mining around the planet, I think there's like about 12 mining firms control the majority of the hash rate. Way back, a decade ago, it was just sort of, I think it was much more decentralized. So this problem of centralization is going to grow more and more, and I think it should be more and more discussed. But yeah, you're right about El Salvador. I think that was an excellent move by Ned Bukele. I think it was an excellent move primarily because it really changed people's perception of El Salvador as a country. So El Salvador used to be, when people would mention El Salvador to you before they did Bitcoin legal tender, you would say it was synonymous with crime, highest crime rate in the world. But now when you mention El Salvador to somebody, they may think, oh, was that country that you can sort of Bitcoin's legal in it? Yes. So it was a public relations excellent move. I actually went there. I covered the Bitcoin legal reserve, not Bitcoin legal tender law when it came out. Chatted to people. They're all getting digital wallets and stuff like that. And there was just there was a really good mood in the country around that time. But incidentally and ironically, a lot of people cashed out their Bitcoin for stablecoins, dollar stablecoins at that time. People were telling me that, so one or two would say, no, I'm keeping my Bitcoin. I think everyone got like $30 of Bitcoin each. But there were a lot of people saying they're just, and this was way back in, was it 2021, that they were DCAing into Bitcoin, with whatever little sort of disposable income that they had. They were putting a little bit into Bitcoin. So yeah, I think it's done great for El Salvador.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, at that time too, there was less ways to use your Bitcoin, right? You really had to exchange it to do the things you do to live your life, which is one of the main ideas coming forward. And we saw that at Bitcoin conference as well. Have these real world use cases for spending your crypto. On coffee. Anyway, so Brian, it's been really great to get your global perspective. Obviously, you're trotting the world with
No,
BeInCrypto, covering this. So tell us a
tr-
little bit
tr-
more.
oh yeah, trotting the world from this chair. So virtually trotting the world.
Yes,
I never moved in this
virtually
position.
trotting the
And I,
world.
and I just wear this same jacket. That's it. Just sit here. I pretend that I am going around the world, but I'm actually just sitting in the same position, watching it all virtually. But I suppose that's the Web3 experience.
It very much is. And so tell us more, though, about what BeInCrypto does. You guys are decentralized, right? Everyone's working from different places around the world. Tell us more so our listeners can check you guys out.
Well, BeInCrypto is like, we're talking top three when it comes to crypto publications globally. And it's unsurpassed in its eyes and ears in nearly every location around the world. So when you say global with BeInCrypto, they just knock it straight out of the ballpark in comparison to the competition out there from crypto news outlets. So BeInCrypto have desks, almost like correspondent desks in, you just name a location, name 3 locations, and probably there is a BeInCrypto, either a BeInCrypto team there, like a small team, or a BeInCrypto journalist. So there are eyes and ears on the ground that can get scoops, that can get exclusives, that can get breaking news across the planet. And the stories get translated into plus 25 languages around the globe. So it's really, really, really not exclusive, but really inclusive crypto news outlet. And there's a large proportion of the staff are female. And I believe BeInCrypto just has the right, when it comes to the balance and when it comes to overall sentiment, and when it comes to its news angles, when it comes to its alignment, when it comes to its news philosophy, and when it comes to its ethos, it's just got the right balance. And yeah, there's lots of exciting things happening. There's lots of new podcast initiatives happening, lots of new collaborations, and we're moving sort of a little bit out of that tight crypto bubble when it comes to, there's a lot of news organizations that are covering this space, but BeInCrypto have a lot of contacts with people, big names, big influencers and experts and analysts in, say, quantum computing, in artificial intelligence, in traditional finance, in geopolitical issues. So it's a really vibrant, happening space. But as I said, it's truly global. Like, that's one thing that BeInCrypto has that is kind of unsurpassed in this space.
Well, that's awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on today. You have plenty of insights with, like you said, having a really distributed team. You get to really get insights from all over, be able to speak to them very eloquently. And then also, if something's coming up, you can make sure you have your team go and do that. So, Brian, for people who want to go learn more about BeInCrypto, where should they look?
Oh, just go onto any of our social media channels, go onto our homepage, beincrypto.com, go onto our YouTube channel. There's lots of new exciting videos going to be coming up very, very soon on that. And you can look at all the excellent past videos. But yeah, please just check it out, get into the ecosystem, and enjoy and engage as well. So reach out to us.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much. That's going to wrap up today's episode on the Edge Up Show. We covered the SEC Turnabout, MicroStrategy's Playbook adoption, and institutional Bitcoin. Join the conversation on social and let us know what you thought about today's conversation.
Thanks for joining us. I'm January with Richard. Stay curious, keep pushing boundaries, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's next on the Edge of Show.